Jordan Davis did a tremendous job, but you don't want him playing that level of snaps every week.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack, John McMullen, inching closer to week number 2 in the NFL. Eagles will take on the Chiefs at 4:25 on Sunday afternoon. Johnny Mack, how you doing this Wednesday morning, brother?
Game week 2. Yeah, this is when it all starts. Wednesday, you got Nick Sirianni, you got practice, you got open locker rooms. So it's on to the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl rematch, in case you haven't heard.
Yep, no doubt, John. The news we got yesterday was obviously Jalen Carter escapes his suspension, a further suspension. They gave him a time served, 1 game, a big old fine, John. I joked that might be the most expensive loogie in the history of all time. What do you make of the Jalen Carter news that came down yesterday? He will be available to go for Sunday.
Yeah, that kind of shook out the way expected after the news didn't come Monday. If he's going to get suspended, it was probably going to be on Monday. And then when that didn't happen, the speculation was that he would be considered a time served suspension plus fined a game 2 a game check, because that he got paid for week 1. So that part of it makes sense. We'll see if the Eagles do anything else. The most interesting part to me, though, was I believe Tom Pelissero had it first, is that the Eagles agreed when this kind of stuff happens and you get suspended, you can reserve the right to go after some bonus money. And it's happened in the past with Jordan Addison. We've gotten a much stickier situation, but they went and got his bonus money back. Not that if he comes back from his suspension and he plays, he's going to get the money, but it's no longer guaranteed, fully guaranteed. And the Eagles agreed with Drew Rosenhaus not to pursue that, which is interesting to me only because, why would you you don't have to go after it. You just reserve the right to go after it if something else happens. And they took that off the table. So that part was interesting to me, probably nobody else, but from a business perspective, because there's this mentality that Jalen Carter is going to be the highest paid defensive player in football. That's how contracts work. Micah got this. He's going to get this. I don't think that's the case anymore. From Jalen Carter's perspective, that's the biggest part of this. I don't even think that's not even in the equation anymore. He's not going to leave Micah Parsons. And I think people were putting the cart before the horse anyway there, because he would have had to have an all-pro season, which maybe he will have, maybe he would have, but he's got to do it first. But this, he's going to get paid well, don't get me wrong, very well. But this is going to save the Eagles some bucks down the road, which in just a business sense, which again, people don't care about, may help them.
Going to be interesting to see how that plays out. John, in terms of that clause in the contract, is that pretty generic in all contracts, or is that specific to players like Carter, who was drafted and did have some, obviously, things that happened in his past when he was drafted? So maybe you throw a clause in there, to prevent further behavior or to give yourself an out based on further behavior, or is that more of a generic NFL football contract clause?
I would think, no, there's not one boilerplate NFL contract. If that were the case, that, there would be no need for agents.
No, I just meant like that specific clause, though. Is that in everything, or?
No, obviously, if you have issues, it becomes a bigger deal. So it probably is. And again, I can't. It's only speculation. It's probably more defined, more clearly defined. But as you see with Addison, who's the most recent, I don't know if he had problems. I'm not aware of them coming out of college. And he had it in his contract. So it's not rare. But you saw Shamar Stewart holding out in this, and you go, why is he holding out? Well, it was for one specific clause in the contract that had nothing to do with that. It had to do with other things, and also sort of timing of bonus money and that kind of stuff. But so there are things. There's no boilerplate, and certainly, because of the issues he had in college, it was probably more structured, more paid attention to, more detail to it. I would guess, but that's just a guess. Um, without seeing, but no, it's not the same for everybody.
Good stuff there for Jalen Carter, but he is back. John, how much does that mean for the Eagles team out there on Sunday? Obviously, they had to play Week 1 without Jalen Carter. Vic talked about that yesterday and how much of a challenge that was, especially when you lose them right before you're about to start. Not much time to prep, John, for losing a player that good. So, how much of an addition is Jalen Carter going to be for the defense this weekend?
Well, huge. I mean, he's the most talented defensive player on the team. I'm no longer calling him the best because that's Zach Bond until he proves otherwise. But I have to be very, uh, disciplined to say that. But he's the most talented Eagles defensive player. Obviously, one of their best players. So, yeah, anytime you get him back on the field, it's positive. It also, Jordan Davis did a tremendous job, but you don't want him playing that level of snaps every week. And I think it showed up, but Jordan played one of his best games. Moro Ojomo, I think it hurt more because I think he's probably better suited to be in that 30-35 rep range to take advantage of the speed, the athleticism. And once you get up to the 50s, he's probably wearing down a little bit, especially against guys like Tyler Smith, who are huge, powerful people. So I think it hurt him more. But long term, obviously, you can't have Jordan Davis playing that much. And then the Eagles roster churn after acquiring Tank Bigsby, which was a surprise. Gabe Hall is the player they waived, which made no sense to me.
Yeah, why him over Obo?
They got 7 edge rushers now. Remember, they added Zadarius Smith since week 1. They added Zadarius Smith and elevated Patrick Johnson. They have 7 edge rushers on the 53. And they played 4 by just choice. It wasn't like a Carter situation. What do you need those guys on the roster for? Meanwhile, Gabe Hall played. He was active, even if Carter, he didn't play a lot, but he was active, even if Carter wasn't suspended. He was going to play. Yeah, that was a strange one to me. Plus he's got to go through waivers, so you might lose him. Whereas if you cut, you're not going to cut Uche, but if you cut Ojulari, he's vested now. This is his 4th year. They moved it down to 3 years. So yeah, you can make the wink deal. And my argument would be, why would you even want, or Obo? Obo's not, either one. They weren't even active.
Well, Obo is 30 years old. You cut a 24-year-old DT who played in week 1.
Yeah.
I don't really get that.
Welcome to the party. I don't get it either. Yeah. Maybe they think there's some value there to do something else. I don't know.
I don't know. We'll find out what they end up doing. I mean, Howie's making a lot of moves in the roster, John. Clearly not too happy with how the roster looked at the start of the season. So he continues to shake and bake. What'd you make of Vic Fangio's comments yesterday, John? He made some comments on everybody. He talked about Makuba. He talked about Adoree Jackson. Vic talked about everybody yesterday. What stuck out to you, John?
Well, Dory's going to start, which is going to upset some people.
Yep.
Pretty much said Jacorian Bennett's not ready, or certainly hasn't seen enough of him yet. So it doesn't seem like it's throw him into the deep end of the pool type situation with Jacorian Bennett. So you're going to have to suffer through Adoree Jackson. Eagles fans are not happy with that, I'm sure. I thought he did interesting point to his technique, because in theory that should be what a strength of his game at this stage of his career. So, That's probably not a good sign either. But to me, it tells you it's the best guy I got available right now. Um, and with the Cooper stuff, he again said he doesn't want to move him. Preferably, the exact quote was, "Preferably, we want to keep him at nickel." Nick Sirianni said the same thing the day prior. So I think all that talk may be a little bit overblown because they seem to want to keep him inside. Um, and then his, wording of Makuba was interesting. He said he had a couple major busts, which is not a surprise. I mean, but typically you don't hear that clear explanation. But you see busted coverages all over the place. I mean, the 2 night games, busted coverages all over the place. Um, Buffalo's got a bad defense, but Flores is tremendous and he does a lot of wacky shit. And guess what? Guys make mistakes and they're not in the position they want to be. And Fangio is sort of more towards not as quite as off the out of left field as Brian Flores, but he's more in that category of very complicated. Um, so you're going to see some busted coverages. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he's a rookie player. I don't think that's crazy too. I think about John. Anything else from Vic that stuck out to you? And in his comments yesterday, I know he made comments on Jordan Davis playing a bigger role and kind of said, I don't think he would have been able to do that last year. Which I don't know, is that a good or a bad comment? I don't really know what to make of that comment. Anything else?
It's just a conditioning comment. He wouldn't have
Yeah,
been
but
able
I
to
mean,
play
you got to
that.
think that that's not a glowing comment for Jordan Davis.
No.
Yeah.
Conditioning standpoint, no, but everybody already knew that. And he has gotten in better cosmetic shape. The positive is he proved it's not just cosmetic. He's out there playing at a high level, major snaps. So that's to me, Jordan Davis is one of the biggest positives of week 1, maybe the biggest positive for the way he played in that situation with that many snaps. I do think I kind of chuckled at his Zadarius Smith speak. I haven't really tracked him that much. Another indication of this mentality that Vic is running the personnel on defense is not the case. How he makes those decisions, then it's up to Vic how to use them. But I do think he'll be very happy with Zadarius Smith when he gets to see the skill set. Because, way, way more advanced than what the Eagles have at edge rusher right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Vic also made a comment on Jalen Carter, talked about the leadership, John. To be considered a leader, actions speak louder than words, and he has to speak with his actions. I thought that was a good comment from Vic Fangio, but it does seem like that's going to be more handled by Nick and Howie than it will be by Vic with Jalen Carter.
Yeah. It's up to the organization, whether they do anything further. Obviously, they're not going to talk about it. Nick has been very clear about that. I don't think Jalen will make the mistake to talk about it. So, the only thing that we'll be able to see is if they bench him for a series or bench him for a quarter, which, I don't get. I wouldn't bother with that. I said it to me, it's very collegey. I don't think it accomplishes much. But to the business standpoint, agreeing not to take the bonus money off the table, I don't think that's exactly a deterrent.
Well, how do you view that then? The bonus
I
money?
view that as talent gets a longer leash. That's how I view that.
Yeah, but you also said it could impact or you do think that the future contract's not going to be what we thought it was.
Well, that's because of the assumptions.
Right.
He's going to get paid a shitload of money. He's just not going to get paid Micah Parsons money. So that from that standpoint, it's how much money do you need at that point? Just the ability to say, I'm the highest paid defensive player in the history of football for 3 weeks or whatever it ends
Yeah,
up
right.
being. So that's all I'm talking about. And it might save the Eagles a couple bucks, which might help a little bit. But I'm saying if you're trying to deter the player from doing similar things, there's not a lot of deterrent there, but we'll see how it shakes out.
Yep, we will see how it shakes out. That's the update, John. Before we get to Mike Gill, real quick, any other comments on Kevin Patullo, who spoke yesterday? Michael Clay spoke as well. So not sure if you got some clarity from him on Tank Bigsby. I didn't get to hear all of Michael Clay. I did hear Kevin Patullo. Any other takeaways from the coordinators who spoke yesterday, John, outside of Vic?
Yeah, it was a big day for Michael because Nick talked so much about him, talked so glowingly about him, and they had a really good game, special teams wise. Kavonte Turpin, arguably the best returner in football. They pinned him in for the most part. Braden Mann was phenomenal. Jake Elliott was phenomenal. Really good day for the special teams, with the exception of losing Ben Van Sumeren on the opening kickoff. But really good day for the special teams. With Kevin, yeah, I mean, you got to ask him the AJ question. And Devontae, I think it gets framed as the AJ question. Devontae didn't get the ball either.
Yeah, what do you have? 3 targets for 16 yards or something?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I do think people don't understand. Like every single game plan the Eagles had. I used to say this about Jonathan Gannon, who didn't blitz a lot, and Vic doesn't blitz a lot because they play the same scheme. But
right.
People didn't like that at the time, and they're like, they're always in the game plan. Sometimes you don't pull it out. In the case of offensively, every game plan, AJ's the number 1 target, Devontae's number 2, Dallas is number 3. For whatever reason, they don't get to it in certain games. You got to give the other team credit. But I did ask him about manufacturing touches, because there's the mentality of some coaches. Well, if you can't get somebody involved in the normal course of the offense to manufacture a touch, and I thought it was interesting. He said it's more about the play and the down manufacture touches than actually trying to get somebody specific the football. If it presents itself, you'll obviously want it in your playmaker's hands if you're going to manufacture a touch. But, if you're behind the chains, you want full field reads, he said. If you're staying in phase, which the Eagles were in phase. That's the key. The Eagles were in phase pretty much the whole game. That's why it looks so good to the naked eye. They weren't behind the sticks. They weren't in these backed up situations too much. And when you're in phase, you just play your game, basically, which I agree with.
Yeah, good stuff there, Johnny Mac. Good press conferences yesterday from those guys, from the coordinators. Now getting ready for week number 2 versus Kansas City Chiefs. Eagles will be back out there today, practicing today, and they'll have walkthrough on Saturday. So a couple practices here for the Birds to get ready for. We'll see about them. John, you don't get much access to them, though, do you? What do you get, like 10 minutes or something?
What, practice?
Yeah.
Wednesday's pretty good. Wednesday's like about, because they have a larger stretching and individual portion. Wednesday's the longest practice of the week, so it's more like a half hour, closer to it.